more riders in the Tour de France observing a minute's silence in memory of Italian Fabio Casartelli, who died in a race fall during the 15th stage. It was a somber mood, the 16th, and indeed race officials have said it had been annulled from the calendar. Casartelli leaves a 4-month-old son and a wife. Is to be buried in the northern Italian town of Como.
What a beautiful sight. So some lovely towns and small villages have come out of the Pyrenees now. We're on the flatlands heading back in towards Pau. We're inside the last 40 kilometres or so of this race. All on Sainte-Marie, the church in the background. They've just come through there now and on their way in towards the finish in Pau. Very, very flat run in to the finish. A bit of a following wind, I think, behind them will keep them going at a great rate of knots. 203 kilometres covered. This is the sprint coming up at the little town of Gos. Well, so far the first sprint of the day was just a gift from the main crowd as they let Armstrong roll over in front of Chandri and Aparicio. There's Jalabert in the green jersey. He's got a tremendous number of points in the green jersey competition, and I don't think he'll be too bothered about who gets these points right now. Jalabert 272 points against Abdou Jafarov 202 points, and Andreu in third spot with 164.
Abdou Jafarov is moving up there towards the finish. We see him there in our picture now, going up on Steve Hodges' wheel, now parallel with Jalabert. But there's the sprint now coming up, so what are they going to do here now?
They're just rolling along.
Just rolling along, yeah. Just rolling along.
Well, they just rolled across that one. There was no aggression because these riders here, in a very gentlemanly way, are riding in towards the finish at Pau. There, the arm going up from the TVM riders, and also the Udo Boltz, the German national champion for the Telecom, has now gone through this town of Gos.
You can see now that we're out of the mountains now when you start seeing all these roundabouts. There's a puncture from Kasputis, is it?
I'm not sure how many cells we got left of it.
Yeah,
it was,
yeah.
Yep.
Kasputis.
Well, he's soon be back now, and you see the crowd along the road here with Jalabert on the front. And the crowd in the finishing area here very much full of Spaniards, because we're so close to the Spanish borders here, with the Pyrenees splitting off France and Spain. We can see the Basque flags in the background as well. I can also see here, I'm not quite sure it's the New Zealand or the Australian flag. I can't determine which one it is, with the Union Jack tucked in the corner and the white stars on it. So some of you now tell me very quickly where it comes from. But we've got a flag here that finishes a nice little banner which says Indurain written all over it as well. And a very patient crowd here. In fact, they're applauding. There's a chap pushing an enormous little road sweeper which is whirling away down here to clear the road out, and the crowd very good-naturedly, because we're running way behind schedule, something like about an hour and a half, I suppose, behind schedule. So I'm sorry to all you tennis fans. Now he's being wildly applauded by the people who've been sitting here since around about 2 o'clock this afternoon, so like 4.5 hours, and good-naturedly they've been watching anything that moves and being very much part of the scene here today.
Of course, you must not forget that the temperature here is, I'd say, very close to 40 degrees. The sun is very hot, and out there with those tribunes where the people are standing, there's no shelter whatsoever. There's no, it's not like the Nissan Classic when we had it in Ireland,
the rain, go on.
No, there was always these tribunes were always covered over. But of course, there's always fear of rain in Nissan Classic. But here they're wide open, and the sun is just beating down on top of all those people standing over there opposite us. So I'm sure it must be very hot indeed.
Man reveling in the sunshine, in the yellow on your screen, the Miguel Indurain, who always goes better when the sun is on his back. He's got the yellow jersey. He's almost in an invincible position at the moment. 2 minutes and 46 seconds ahead of Alex Zulle. Beyond Rees back in third spot, 5 minutes and 59 seconds now. We just had a quick look then at Zulle, then Rees in the red and white colours of the Danish national world champion, is in third spot, 5:59 back. Jalabert lost his third place yesterday. We're looking at Podenzana at the back of this little group now, the ex-champion of Italy, just hanging on at the back of the group. But Jalabert is fourth overall, 6:26 down. Gossi is in fifth spot at the moment. Maori sixth, Escart in seventh, and looks like Vaskamp in trouble.
It does, yeah. He didn't seem to have mechanical trouble. He just got shot at the back. Has the pace gone up? It has gone up a little bit, all right, but the riders are just so tired now that someone has attacked Dave, yeah. But like the way it is all today, that this race now there's planned to be a 6-hour run. Now it'll be going into 7-hour. It'll be going into 7-hour, so it will. So it means riders, in regards to eating and drinking and everything else, it changes everything for them. So the fact that they're all riding slowly is also sometimes more tiring.
I was thinking that too, actually, Steve, because the sun's beating down. It wasn't quite so hot. This ride of nearly 150 miles a day would not have been that difficult, but they're doing it in the heat. They're going along here. They're still doing around about 20 miles an hour, and they've got all those miles a day. If you're racing hard, the adrenaline is flowing, you're full of excitement, and it passes very, very quickly. I suppose some of the chaps are feeling tired. They're back thinking, oh, my goodness, another 40 kilometres to go. Depression must set in.
Exactly, and also it all causes all kinds of problems, dehydration and everything else. So we saw there Miguel on the front himself, the man himself, stretching it out. I don't know whether he really wanted to stretch it out or doesn't really realise that there's a very, very, very tired bunch behind him. And also one thing which is very difficult is when the first effort in the day, the more days and the more stages you do in the Tour de France or in any major tour, the longer it takes you to get warmed up. So today they've been riding along at a nice casual pace all day, up over the Obisque, up over Col de Solar. Now they're down to 40 kilometres to the finish, where they haven't really put out their system under pressure. So the first time the body goes under pressure, which we are seeing now, it's the first real time the body's being under pressure, it always hurts so much that you feel like, oh, what's happening here? I'm never going to get to the finish. So once they make the first effort, then you start burning out the lactic acid and everything outside of your legs and what have you. You start feeling much better. So just we saw there the acceleration from Miguel. Maybe that explains the reason why we saw some of the riders just hanging on the back.
And Miguel Andreu, who did not ride the Tour of Italy this year, choosing instead to concentrate on winning his fifth successive Tour de France, looks well set now to win the fifth Tour de France, because today was going to be the last day when they could really, the mountain climbers, have thrashed him. But of course, still we've got the time trial yet to come, and if he has a bad day in a time trial, he's got to watch out for Bjorn Ries, who frightened him on that Serang time trial we had up in Belgium. So it's not over yet by any means, but even when it's all over and done with, whatever the decision might be, this year, of course, they can gain their revenge by going into the Tour of Spain, because it's the first time ever we had the Tour of Spain to end the season. One or two riders who have not done well in the season will be looking to do well in the Tour of Spain, and there was an agreement from Benesto that Indurain would ride the Tour of Spain, Stephen, as you may remember, but Indurain said, no, I haven't committed myself. So I'm just wondering, looking back there into this pack now, as to whether Indurain might still ride the Tour of Spain, because if we're going to cover on Eurosport, I'd like to see him under threat of other riders who still want at the end of the season to have some success.
Yes, of course, but at the same time, Indurain will have ridden and more than likely won the Tour de France, and I think he's going to find it very difficult to get total motivation for the Tour of Spain, because the only thing he can go for then is the World Championships. So if he feels he has a hope of winning the World Championships, then he may ride the Tour of Spain. But if he feels the World Championships, well, it's only a very slight chance of winning it. I cannot see him riding the Tour of Spain, because the Tour of Spain is another 3 weeks. And I've been talking to some of the older riders there, not so much old riders, but my generation, what have you, and they all seem to say that the problem is now that there's so much pressure and stress, not only from the terrain and everything else, but from all from the media and sponsors, that it's very difficult to ride even two major tours now, because one is as hard as the other, whereas before you had one hard tour, which is the Tour de France, one second best hardest tour would be the Tour of Italy, then you had a Tour of Spain, so you had three different tours. Whereas now you have three tours, then they have equal importance to the sponsors, and become very, very hard. So it's very difficult now to motivate yourself and also to survive physically, even two major tours now.
Well, Tour of Spain yet to come on the calendar, and of course the World Championships back in October, way back. Normally we've got them sort of tail end of August, been put even further back. So I think Colombia, and many riders are saying the heat is going to be too intense, the course is too tough, it's too short, sharp, and suited for the Colombian climbers. But we'll have to wait and see, because they're covering that one as well on Eurosport. And this year as well, there's going to be a Tour of China, believe it or not, because even China now said, you think about that, in China they actually manufacture something like 50 million bicycles a year. So I'm not going to say they're all going to take part in the Tour on their big black sit-on big bicycles, but it's a great cycling nation, and you couldn't really have a Tour of China covering the whole of China, because it's just a massive country, but it's the most populated country in the world, and they're now going to have a Tour of China as well. So I expect some of the riders we're seeing today will go over there to ride in China, and I'm not quite sure whether they might want me to go, but I'm going to pack me chopsticks just in case.
Well, I believe at the moment some of the Chinese clubs and professional teams, or not professional teams, but they're looking to make professional teams, and they're inviting some of the European riders out there. I know Eric Maschler, who rode with me in the Carrera team, spent last year out there riding with some Chinese or Japanese team, and found it was very, very good. He said that the roads are great, the people look after you very good, and the money is good. So this could be a new nation starting up in the world of cycling.
And of course, Kasputis goes off and rides the Japan Cup, and he's an idol out there, isn't he?
He is, yeah. And Carrera bikes at this moment, actually, would you believe, are going to a bomb out there in Japan. Because I spoke to Carrera the other night there, and they were telling me I'm doing a cycle show for them in LA in September, and they were saying they're going into LA, but LA wasn't a big market for them. That the big market for them was actually China and Japan. So I was very surprised.
Well, the Chinese and Japanese, as they become, or certainly Chinese, as they become more affluent, are looking to get products with good brand names on them. I certainly know in Japan as well, though, selling into Japan with stuff from Europe gets very high taxes upon it. They certainly like to look for exclusive European products. And the way here, what you're looking at our screen now, has gone across there. The Japanese really have liked the character, but I think there's something about him which appeals to them.
Of course, but it appeals to everybody. Kasputis' style of riding and this mentality, it's definitely appealed to everybody over here in Europe. So why not appeal to people over there? Because everybody at the end of the day likes the exploit and likes to see people going off the front and people attacking and people animating races and what have you. So Kasputis was one of the best through to the end of the 80s.
And of course we might find at the end an influx of riders from the Far East into the top cycle racing. You never know what might happen, because we got some 25 nations taking part in the Tour de France this year. A far cry from 1903, when they're all French taking part in the Tour de France, which is very much a French race for the French. And it went on like that for many, many years. But now, one by one, other nations are taking part, and we might well find some of the Far Eastern cyclists bit by bit coming, just like the Japanese have dominated sprinting in recent years. They're rolling now at a fair rate of knots, these riders on this stage into Tarbes. Some 237 kilometres to be covered today. The sun beating down on their backs, and then tomorrow from Pau to Bordeaux, heading into the wine district, and then we're going to head up towards Limoges, and then for the time trial, and finally the long hop into Paris to finish the Tour de France in the Champs-Élysées on the Sunday. The Tour de France is great international bicycle race now. We're talking very much about the influx of Japanese componentry into the cycle racing sport, and maybe we might find some Japanese road riders making progress as well. But certainly on the track, the Peran racing in Japan, an enormous way in which they bet upon bike races, and they do all sorts of combinations of colours and start gates and what have you. There's an extremely big money on. In fact, much of the money that comes from Peran racing we pumped into the Japanese cycle industry, who've really done the right thing. I remember many years ago somebody saying to me, oh, the Japanese will demolish the bicycle business in Europe just like they demolished the motorcycle business. I said, no, it's not like that, because when you ship a bike, if you look at one of these bikes here in a box all the way through, it costs a lot of money to ship the thing, and you can't pay for shipping air. So I felt somehow that with the established names in Europe, the Japanese bicycle manufacturers wouldn't crack it. In fact, what the clever so-and-sos did was they didn't go for selling bikes, they went and concentrated on components, and particularly people like Sunto and Shimano, who really had had a good look at all the gear mechs and chamber sets and all the bits and pieces which you bolt onto a bike, and eureka, they've produced and become very competitive with the Campagnolas and Saxes of this world, and that's one way in which they've infiltrated the European market. A bunch of all grouped back together again on their miscellaneous components from across the world, and the frames as well. Still, most of these manufactured in Europe, where we can still make extremely good frames, wheels, tires, tubes, spokes, etc. But I say the Japanese and the Far Eastern component manufacturers have done their own thing in a very simple way of doing it. But the threat from China, they are an enormous manufacturing nation. They still actually make a lot more big bikes with black frames and sit-on legs than anybody else in the world. And I wonder how many of these riders we're looking at today will make their way into the Tour of China. The big trouble, of course, as you make this sport 52 weeks of the year, that these riders just cannot stand the strain, the stress of racing day in, day out, and therefore the number of names that can appear in various classic races will diminish. So we've probably got to find some way of making sure that they don't blow themselves up, burn themselves out, these riders, because although it's nice to have these names come along, you just got to recognise they are, after all, human beings, and sitting in the saddle for over 120 miles a day for something like about 21 days with just a couple of days rest is just mind-boggling to anybody, even just touring, let alone racing. But they've been averaging now just a sniff under 25 miles an hour since we set off from Paris, and we've now covered just on 1,800 miles.
This year, when you say you have so many miles, you must remember there's actually 2 rest days in the Tour this year as well. So
not much rest day the first one.
No, it was. The first rest day was also transfer from Liège down to Grand Bournon. So the riders spent most of the day in the plane and travelling and what have you, and we're only able to get on the bikes in the afternoon. So we had 1.5 rest days really. But when you see the way the riders have been riding since the start of the Tour, every day on the attack, it's quite normal that today, and after the recent tragedy, it's quite normal that they are riding a little slow today.
And so we have much more chance towards the end of the stage to see riders we wouldn't normally see near the front. The riders from the Ake team, the Chazelle team, all been moving up towards the fronters in the group. The helicopter hovering overhead now. We've got some 25 kilometres to go towards the finish, and the riders therefore now some 15 miles to go, and they'll probably do that, I suppose, in round about 40 minutes or so. We have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's going to be a very, very long day for the riders. They set off this morning at 10:30. It's now 5:50, so that's some 7 hours.
Not a bad day for you and I, because we're going to finish at half past 6 in Central European time. We've been on air, about 3.5 hours now, Stephen. Yeah. And I hope we haven't, by the way, bored you people back at home, those of you who've set your video recorder. In fact, if you set your video recorder, it's going to stop with about an hour and a half to go. And when you come back to who's on the stage from your day in the office or down the pit or working in the factory or in the shop or supermarket or solicitor's office or whatever.
Or riding a bike.
Ride a bike and discover you've still got nearly an hour and a half of programme which you haven't got. Please do bear with us, because today has been a day which has been a promenade in respect of Fabio Casatali, who unfortunately died yesterday in that very, very bad crash descending the climb just after 34 kilometres of the race. So one can respect the wishes of the riders. I hope you back at home watching it, and you tennis players who are expecting to see the Mercedes Cup will also respect at the moment what has been going on today.
We now see Steve Bauer here talking with Jean-Marie Leblanc, the Tour de France organiser. He is possibly trying to combine something, or Jean-Marie Leblanc is maybe giving Steve Bauer some advice maybe on what to do, because here we're seeing something which is very strange. It is a very strange day, of course, because of our tragedy of yesterday, but at the same time I think there's been an incredible sign of solidarity throughout the last 24 hours for the riders and throughout the caravan, everybody involved in the Tour de France. So we don't know actually what's going to happen in the finish. It's anybody's guess really. I guess that the Motorola riders will be allowed to ride away. It's something which has never been seen before in the Tour. Of course, unfortunately for the Tour, we haven't had many tragedies fatal tragedies. But at the same time, I think today is an exceptional day, and I can see I feel it from looking at the riders today, the way they've all been riding, that they might just let the motor roller riders go, and maybe one of them go maybe to the front, maybe to cross the line here on Poe and then in the front.
And still they stream then toward the finish in Pau. Just less than, 24 kilometres to go, where a massive crowd has been patiently waiting for the riders to arrive. You see the shadows of the riders on the road. The sun beats down on their backs. They started this morning in Central European time at 10:20 from Tarbes, covering nearly 150 miles in all, and that means in back in UK it'll be 9:30 at your time. We're now at 10:06 Central European time, which is 10:05 for you people back at home. So you just come home from work and you switch on your telly, you're watching the stage Tour de France, which is running well behind schedule for reasons that no doubt those who've read your national newspapers and seen it on the newsreels yesterday will respect and understand. In fact, I was speaking to Stephen Hodge this morning, and he said quite a number of the riders who saw some of the newsreels here in France were very upset with the way the incident yesterday was treated by the news media, but now that is all forgotten as they trundle on in toward the finish. Stephen was just saying that we've never had a day like this for many, many years. In fact, it was way back in 1967, after 13th of July, when on stage 13 of the Tour de France, my good late friend Tommy Simpson collapsed and died on the climb of the Ventoux. So that's a long way back, and the next day after they had their moment of silence, then off down the road went the Great Britain team, because in those days they had national teams riding the Tour de France, and Holborn it was that took the stage victory in memory of the great Tom Simpson. So we know here as they're coming along, Stephen Roche has just given the nod. We've got another important visitor. We've already been speaking to Andreu Delagarde, where Stephen was using his French to speak to Andreu Delagarde, and I'll let Stephen introduce our next guest this afternoon. Certainly on Eurosport we're bringing you a very different programme, and I hope that you recognise that we on Eurosport do bring you live programmes. We're not canning things for you, cutting out things we don't want to show you, cleaning up the bits here and there. As I said many times in the past, you get it warts and all. We're just on air, we're watching the screen going on, we're doing our homework, we're talking around, we're talking to people, listening to race radio, and we try and bring you the depth of feelings with the Tour de France. We try and bring you some of the background of the people that are with the Tour de France. We try and give you some information about the riders who you don't normally see at the front of the Tour de France, just so you can perhaps have a little bit of understanding about what is going on. And every so often we get out our great big butterfly net and we catch somebody on the tribune here, and we grab them and we say, please come and speak to us. And of course, Stephen being the multilinguist now, Stephen, it's over to you. Explanations and off you go.
The man I have beside me now is Francis Lafargue, who was actually the manager of the Venezia team, and also a close friend and also confidant of Miguel Indurain. And also when you bring up Miguel, you always get Francis on the phone. Francis, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Hello. Francis, maintenant on est à la sortie des Pyrénées. Est-ce que tu crois maintenant que la course est gagnée maintenant pour Miguel? Est-ce que tu penses qu'il va maintenant remporter son 5e tour? I just asked Francis if he thinks that now we're coming out of the Pyrenees, if he thinks that Miguel has the Tour de France won, and if this is going to be the win, he's going to win his 5th Tour de France.
Je pense que nous avons beaucoup de chance maintenant. Miguel a beaucoup de chance pour remporter ce tour. Je dirais tout simplement qu'il a terminé presque le livre. Il ne reste plus que le dernier chapitre.
He said we are very, very lucky now to be here in Pau after a very, very hard race. He wouldn't say we've actually finished the book. He says we're going to start the last chapter now. Qu'est-ce que tu penses maintenant de la journée d'aujourd'hui, qui le coureur maintenant il va être très en retard, on sait pourquoi, mais comment tu vois l'arrivée des coureurs aujourd'hui? I just asked Francis what he thinks of today. The riders are coming in very, very late because we all know why, but how does he think the day is going to finish today?
Je pense qu'aujourd'hui, il y a une analyse très simple à fournir et deux choses à dire. La première, c'est que tout le monde connaît la triste nouvelle d'hier.
Francis said that, well, there's one only simple reason for today that everybody knows, but the peloton are solitary in what they're doing.
Le peloton, c'est sûr, et toute la caravane est traumatisée.
The peloton and all the caravan, everybody involved have traumatism.
Et la deuxième chose que je voudrais ajouter, c'est qu'il y avait aussi une étape très difficile et beaucoup de chaleur aujourd'hui.
Also today was a very, very difficult stage with very, very hot weather.
Et d'autre part, un public, un Tour de France, du public ici en direct et des millions de téléspectateurs qui attendent peut-être aussi une arrivée et qui aussi connaît la triste nouvelle d'hier, mais qui attendait un peu plus de sport aujourd'hui.
And also an awful lot of people here waiting here on the finish in Pau, and also a lot of people behind their televisions waiting to see an exciting finish here in Pau. Francis, est-ce que tu penses maintenant, après le Tour de France, Miguel va disputer le Tour d'Espagne? I want to know now, Francis, if after this Tour de France, if Miguel is planning to ride the Tour of Spain.
Nous n'avons pris aucune décision jusqu'à aujourd'hui, car c'est vrai que c'est un problème qui se pose maintenant à nos yeux, et il faudra choisir entre un Tour d'Espagne pour Miguel Indurain ou un championnat du monde et une préparation donc en altitude.
Well, now that Tour de France is finished, the problem Tour de Spain has to be dealt with. So what do we do? Do we decide that we ride a Tour of Spain with Miguel, or do we go for the World Championships with the preparation necessary to win? Francis, je te remercie beaucoup. Thank you very much, Francis.
Can we just stop
Sorry,
here?
David, one question.
Two questions quickly, Stephen. First of all, having watched many Tour de France's,
Après avoir regardé beaucoup Tour de France,
and looking at Indurain this year,
quand on regarde Miguel,
he seemed to be under a lot more pressure. Is that true? He seemed to have to respond more, right
cette
hard.
année, il avait l'air d'être sous beaucoup de pression, qu'il lui a fait besoin d'entrer dedans.
Oui, je crois que Miguel, cette année, a fait un tour, je dirais, beaucoup plus offensif que ces dernières années.
He said that this year, effectively, Miguel has had a Tour de France much more on the offensive.
Mais j'ai vu cependant Miguel très épanoui, très sûr de lui.
He said that he saw Miguel also very sure of himself and very happy.
Et je pense que c'est aussi un mélange d'expérience et de fraîcheur aussi, parce qu'il a une bonne préparation.
He said he feels also down to experience and also the fact that he's come into the tour very fresh.
One quick final short question,
Une question
Stephen.
très courte.
Graham Aubrey started the hour record.
Graham Aubrey a commencé le record de l'heure.
Boardman likewise.
Boardman aussi.
Indurain took it. Will he try and get it back again?
Est-ce qu'Indurain, Miguel, il va essayer de reprendre?
C'est une aventure extraordinaire pour Miguel que le record de l'heure et qui lui a plu énormément.
It was an incredible adventure that Miguel took on to go for the record, the hour record.
Et je crois savoir qu'il a une petite idée derrière la tête. Il aimerait, je crois, recommencer cette aventure du record de l'heure qui lui a beaucoup plu.
He would love to go for this record again.
Okay,
Merci beaucoup.
We better get the message through to Boardman and Aubrey as well then, but it might still be the big having a go at the hour record. Many thanks therefore, and to Stephen likewise for translating both the questions and the answers. I hope you back at home were very interested in what you've just heard, and for those of you who are studying French at school or learnt French in your careers, possibly you might be happy to listen to French on Eurosport. And of course, I also noticed that know that we send Eurosport signal out to 50 million homes, or more than that now, all across Europe, and our signals picked up in many nations where they don't listen to anything else but the English version. I hope that you also have enjoyed listening to some of our French guests today, speaking to Stephen Roche and myself, David Duffield, waiting for the stage to finish in Pau. The sun beating down on the backs of these riders. We start this morning at 20 past 10 Central European time, 20 past 9 for you people back in Great Britain. It's now coming up to 6 o'clock here at the finish at Pau. It's been a long, old, hard day in the saddle. We've been commentating and talking to you here at the finish line for some 3 hours as well. We hope we're going to entertain you and give you some background information on cycling and the various guests we've had here as well. For those who've sustained yourself and watching us all the way through and listening to us not only for today but right the way through since we started the Tour de France, many thanks indeed for tuning to Eurosport. We're very happy to hear your comments, and I say we had that little fax earlier on today handed to me from Andy Moorcroft in Derby, who I know that he and his parents later on in the evening watch what's going on. Hello to Paul and Pete, who in the fax that he said here in fact encapsulated all the thoughts we had here too. So excuse me for repeating myself earlier on. I'll just read Andy's fax which he got this morning. And if you're switched on the television when you come back home and you see this great glorious colour of cyclists riding along here, this will put you in the picture why they're going at this rate or not. He said, would you please also, apart from me just talking about being a keen cyclist and about the commentary of myself and Stephen, would you please also pass on our deepest sympathy to Fabio Casatelli's family, myself and my parents, Paul and Pete, who are very upset and saddened by yesterday's event. I'm sure Fabio would not have wanted the race to stop. After all, cycling was his life. He'll be remembered by all cyclists and cycling fans forever, just like our own Tom Simpson. And I think that also was encapsulated in the cartoon that was in Lakeheath this morning. And I've used the word cartoon in inverted commas. And it showed a cyclist going up through the Pyrenees, up into the sky, and his arms were in the air, as if he said, I've cracked it, I'm there. And on his back were not the polka dots of the King of the Mountains jersey, but little hearts were painted on his jersey. And down below, there were two little spectators in black saying, C'est Fabio. He's gone up there into the sky, riding his bike through. I'm sure he's been with us all day today, so I hope you'll just be with us on the stage into Pau. And apologies to the great tennis fans out there, but I'm sure you'll understand here that we've had an event like which we've not had in the Tour de France since Tom Simpson died in 1967, and to have this, as you saw it yesterday, live on television, brought across the world, is something that really hit to the hearts and minds of everybody associated with this race. It's been a sad day in many respects. You could sense it this morning at Tarbes when it started. It was there in the hearts and minds of the riders as well, and that's why today they've ridden as individuals, not busting a gut to go and race and to get over the line in first place, but just to ride together as cyclists in memory of Fabio. And just to put you in the picture then of the stage as they've gone through, they virtually have shared out most of the awards for the Motorola team that Fabio Casatelli rode for. Over the first of the Col de Miramont, and that was after 9.5 kilometres. Stephen Schwartz, a rider from the Motorola team, the New Zealander, who rode his first Tour de France in the ANC team way back in, 1984, I suppose that would be. Stephen Swart was first over the top of that climb. Gonzalez Almeida was second, Cassani into third spot. By the time he came to a sprint at Benajac after 23 kilometres of racing, Armstrong was first over the line, followed by Maximiliano Sciandri from Derby, the Italian there just following on behind the American ex-world champion. Aparicio was in third spot. By the time we went over the first climb of the day, the big one, the Col de Zulle, we'd had the fourth category just to sort of stretch the legs after 9.5 kilometres, and that one, the Col de Zulle. Armstrong again was over the front, just ahead of Ascula and Kasputis. The whole of the field bunched together and taking it very, very gently indeed. By the time we came to Col de Bisque, that great classic climb in the legends of the Tour de France, Armstrong again was allowed to go over the top of the climb in first place. Uriarte took the climb of the Col de Marie Blanc. By the time he came over to the Col de Soudet, Indurain and Jalabert were on the front. They both just drifted over the line together, and as they came through the Côte de Isabelle and came down to the sprint at Gosby some 34 kilometres to go. I think it was Stephen Hodge who got that one. I didn't make a note of it at all here because it didn't really matter who got it, because what's happening today is all the prize money that was there for the riders to go for today is going to be given to Fabio Casatelli's family. And on the front then, Claudio Kasputis, you can see on his face he's normally a very charming, happy-go-lucky rider, but he's riding, as many of the riders are today, with a very leaden heart.
Of course, Fabio was a training partner of Claudio, so I'm sure him, like all of us here, but possibly Claudio more so because of being a training partner, will be very touched by today's stage.
And Claudio Kasputis, that was the last victor of the stage in the Tour de France when we finished here in 1993. In 1989, Martin Early won the stage here. I remember that vividly on Eurosport. I remember the other ones as well, but very much when Martin Early got the stage into here. He won a stage in the Tour de France, and then Martin went on to win the stage into Pau. Martin Early now taking to mountain bike racing with the rally squad, and doing quite well at that one once he's learnt the skills of staying upright under difficult conditions, because mountain biking is something else. In fact, I saw in the press, I think yesterday or today, Stephen, that Moncassin is looking to ride the French Championships on a mountain bike, which is the most unusual, because he's a sprinter anyway, but he's been riding his mountain bike, he likes it, so he's going to do it. We were talking the other day about how road riders should ride mountain bikes and mountain bikes ridden by road riders. The crossover is becoming quite fascinating now.
Well, Moncassin is a very, he's a sprinter, he's afraid of nothing, so normally a sprinter could make a very, very good downhill rider, defender, so Moncassin being also very, very agile on the bike, I think he could make a very good mountain bike rider, but unfortunately there's not only descents in mountain bikes, you have climbs as well, and the climbs can be very difficult, and Moncassin every time when the road went up, Kasputis got dropped. So I'd say he might do well if there's a lot of a descent, all right. But otherwise, I cannot see him doing very well.
Well, the Tour de France organisers of the event you're watching now are also putting on for the first time a Tour de France, they call it in France VTT, Vélo Tout Terrain, and their mountain bike race will be from the 22nd of August through to the 30th of August, and I'll be interested to see if my friends from Rally are going to take part in that one, and may pop out and keep an eye on it myself as well, because they're going to have almost like a rally raid. They're going to be, whilst they're racing for part of the VTT, they'll also be having like a touring bit between the racing bits. That's going to be quite fascinating. Right, mixed bag of riders though looking down in there. There's no cohesive attempt for the field at the front to drive this one along. 223 kilometres on, they go through Gowne now, the name of a very good insurance company, and 237 kilometres in all to be covered today.
Well, it's just come back now on the race graded that Richard Virenque and Laurent Jalabert have been both been back to the Jean-Marie Leblanc's director's car, so there's something brewing maybe for the final. So we don't know what's brewing, but I think there's something, maybe some gesture maybe going to be made. We don't know yet. We just have to wait to see. We're only some less than 14 kilometres now to the finish day, I think, so we'll find out very shortly. Yes, well, I hope you'll stay with us on Eurosport to watch these riders, the remnants of this race. We're down now to 118 riders, 189 that started out full of enthusiasm, full of hope, and full of passion for this great race. We started out from Saint-Brieuc. This then stage 16 of the Tour de France. Here, Claudio Capucci, they say the last victor of the stage at Pau in 1993. They're just drifting along here at the front. Right, mixed bag of riders trotting along here. Let's go back just for a moment to the Tour de France on mountain bikes. It's going to start on the 22nd of August, where they're going to have a prologue at Mejia. That was where the World Championship held a couple of years ago, and then they're having a special circuit at Mejia as well, and they're going to move all the way through the Alps as well, and then off across to eventually up to La Bouboule, by the way, the final stage, Stephen, you might like to know, in the mountain bike race operated by the Tour de France. The mountain bike Tour de France will actually finish with a special 35 kilometres at La Bouboule. Can I tempt you to ride? No. I have good souvenirs up there, so I prefer staying with them. You know, you see the black tape down here on the motor roller riders' arm here. That's to, of course, in memory of the late Fabio.
And there we are then, 10 kilometres to go. The riders stringing along now, just 10 kilometres to go to finish in Pau. It is absolutely dead flat. The sun has not relented all day. It's been a very tough and sad day for these riders then. Just about 6 miles to go in towards the finish. Won't be long, so about 15 minutes or so before we get to the end of this stage from Tarbes to Pau. Yet again, history being made in the Tour de France. Yesterday we went through that marvellous little village where Christophe cracked his front forks, had to climb down the mountainside with the bike on his back, taking the broken fork in his hand. And he got in there, he had to then operate the forge to braze the fork back in again, and being unable to blow the bellows and do the brazing, he got somebody to help him repair the fork, and then the officials then absolutely penalised him for having outside assistance. Just imagine that. These are the things the Tour de France is famous for. The legendary long lone escapes, the number of stages won, the number of mountains won, the legends of the riders who crashed out when wearing the yellow jersey and failed to finish the race, the pain and the suffering, and also those riders who would win. I mean, Coppi a few years ago won by 22 minutes by the time we got to Paris on that occasion. So this race is full of great historic occasions, and there's so much documented about this race. If you're fascinated by it all, I was saying earlier on the programme, if you buy yourself the Cycling Monthly or Cycling Weekly magazines, which are on sale, in there you'll find there's various booksellers that give you the addresses where you can write up to get books and videos about the Tour de France. It's something which is just unique. Here we now see the Motorola riders going to the front. Steve Bauer, the ex-silver medalist as an amateur, and then turned pro, and be a long or hard stalwart. Steve, and then Swartz, the New Zealander, going through. One from Canada, one from New Zealand. Moving through here, then the Motorola team are beginning to get their riders on the front now. Frankie Ando, the American, on the front. Then Mejia, the Colombian, just going through here. And all the Motorolas now are beginning to get to the front of this race with some 10 kilometres to go. Armstrong is in there as well at the moment, and these remaining Motorola riders are now forming a big colourful cavalcade at the front. The rest of the riders, with due respect, are going in to sit on their wheels.
You see the riders now. We see Mejia here has a hat on him, and exceptionally we see also Lance Armstrong with a hat on him, because normally Lance very rarely wears a hat, but we see him here now with his specialised hard shell on him.
Lance Armstrong showing there on his shoulders the rainbow stripes, which is allowed for the ex-world champions to carry on their jerseys for the rest of their careers. He won that wonderful world championship in Oslo under very difficult conditions. Here, Andreu Peran, who is the Italian in the squad. And we see these 6 riders now taking in turns to ride off the front of this race. And I'm sure that deep down in his heart, Sean Yates, who may be watching our programme at the moment, will feel as sad as we felt all day today, and as sad as we felt yesterday. Sean Yates sidelined and out the race with that tendinitis meant he had to drop out this race, but I'm sure he was also sickened by what happened yesterday, and we're sitting there watching his teammates now rolling in towards the finish at Pau.
I think their face says it all day. There's no need for commentary there. I think it's their faces says it all there. I think actually there is a little gap between themselves. Is there? No, there's not a gap now. Everybody's there.
Are you colder than I am? Who's that?
Gonries rolling through, Ganrada, Akirada, behind the Motorolas. There's just a real mixed bag of riders here, paying their respects to the late Fabio Casatelli by following the Motorola riders in toward the finish at Pau.
There's only some 10 kilometers left to go now at this race, so it's of course it's, I was going to say, it's a historic day for cycling, but we would prefer to not have this kind of history, but it's very, very exceptional in cycling. I'm sure tennis fans who are waiting for the tennis to come along will understand that if they lost one of their greats, that, not even one of their greats, but if they lost one of their people, they'll feel the very same way as the cycling people here today. It's only some 7 or 8 kilometers to go now to the finishing pole.
Steve Bauer with the white hat on, just trundling off the front, the Canadian rider, some 36 years of age, one of the oldest riders in the race, one of the most experienced. Stephen Swartz in New Zealand, moving through, and the rest of the pack of riders showing due deference to the Motorola team on the front. Avada Mejia, 114, 115, the Colombian rider.
A puncture for Rominger.
Another man with a very sad heart, decided to be yesterday in the team bus like many of these riders, just could not believe what had happened.
I'm very happy myself to see this kind of a gesture being made by the peloton, and also from everybody involved in the cycling, because it's sometimes you feel you're only a number in the peloton, whereas now it makes me happy to see that the reaction from the solidarity effort from not only by the riders but also by everyone involved in Tour de France.
More Bauer on the front, the senior citizen really of the peloton. He's had a very up and down career since he took that silver medal in the 1984 Olympics, all of those 11 years ago. And of course it was Olympics in Spain where Fabio Casatali won the Olympic gold medal. Unfortunately his pro career was somewhat marred by a knee injury, and he had to have surgery before he came back into competition. He was racing very well indeed this year in his Motorola team.
I'm sure in one sense all these people standing on the side of the road will be saying to themselves, well, what's happening here? Why are they so late? Why are they riding so slow with only some 5 kilometers to the finish? But I think deep down they will know. The media coverage has been so vast over the last 24 hours that I think everybody must know.
So the riders then heading in to Pau, this town which is at the foothills of the Pyrenees. You can actually, in the winter time, stand here in Pau and look back out at the snow-capped mountains of the Pyrenees. We're very close to where the Pyrenees run down into the Atlantic. A much greener part of the Pyrenees than the abrasive rawness of the eastern side close to the Mediterranean. The Pyrenees have claimed over the years many riders who've had aims and ambitions to win mountain stages and have suffered in their attempts to win those stages. The city of Pau then, who've seen so many of the finishes now, 51 in all. The last time Kasputis was the victor, way back in 1930, it was Binder that took the first stage here, but he's never seen a stage like this one in the past. A slight problem here for Stephen Swartz back, but he'll be pushed in there. You see again the mechanic with the black ribbon on his shoulder. All the Motorola cars this morning, as we set off out from Tarbes, had got the black ribbons tied to their aerials. They were allowed to go ahead of the race, as the riders were too, on the stage end from Tarbes to Pau. Motorola team now stretched from left to right. Coming in to the outskirts then of Pau, this town that was once the capital of Bern, and born here in 1553 was Henry IV, one of the best loved of all French monarchs.
It's just like Andreu is getting back onto the bunch now. We saw the Motorola team as he punctured. We saw Guido Bontepi going up and telling him that he's punctured. So he's eased up now somewhat on the front, letting him get back to join his teammates.
So in this great city down on the flatlands at the foothill of the Pyrenees, waiting. A massive crowd that's been out here. We should have finished well over an hour and a half ago. Now, a helicopter will bring you some shots of this town, and we'll let the pictures tell the story And what has been one of the saddest days in the Tour de France. Certainly yesterday was the saddest, but today you could feel the heavy air of depression across the riders. They start out from Tarbes to Pau, knowing they had to cover 150 miles before the finish of today's stage. And their memories of what happened yesterday. Still, then again, Motorola are beginning to move on to the front, with the rest of the field in their wake.
Boulevard, long straight line where the sprint will be held.
Whilst we're looking at the Motorola riders on the front here, we must not forget the backup team that have lifted this squad from the small beginnings of the 7-11 team, when Jim Okovitz, who is their general manager and director sport team, had that brave ambition of having an American team that would one day ride the Tour de France. And it was the 7-11 team with David Spinney. I think he was the first man to get a stage victory. Must have been around about 1984, when I was working with Channel 4 when he sprinted into victory then. And from that beginning, the 7-11 team developed the Motorola team we're looking at now. Jim Okovitz always had that long ambition to have a strong international team. He's got one now with 3 committees to go. He has as his supporter Henny Kuiper, an ex-Olympic champion and a man who had done great deeds in the Tour de France as well. So all the backup team that were there this morning with sadness there. Well, if we're watching the riders, you can imagine the thoughts of the people in the cars, the people who are back at the hotels now, because cycle race isn't just the riders on the road. You've got managers, masseurs, you've got mechanics, you've got the people who just go ahead, who never see the bike race, who go to the hotels with the bags, get to the hotel rooms, open the doors, make sure they're okay, put the lads' bags in there ready for the riders to come in later on. They fetch and carry for them. It is their life to look after these bike riders. And when one of them goes, then they feel it just as much as we do, just as much as the team riders do. But out there riding, these are the people that the cameras are concentrated upon, but we must not forget the team stuff.
It's actually, the group is actually split now. I think I saw the Motorola riders now are starting to move off the front. Yeah, they're going to finish on their own. With a mark of respect for Fabio. I think that these kind of pictures are not worth really well commentating, Dave. I think it's Simon says it all, I think.
Stephen, with 2 kilometres to go, yesterday was one of those days which you just can't describe. Today is one like that too, and my mind goes back to the time when Ayrton Senna died and had to do a piece on Ayrton too. Any sportsman is totally gutted when somebody loses life taking part in the sport that he enjoys. We all feel it, everybody feels it. You're quite right, it's difficult to say anything. Let's wait, they roll in.
One thing I hope is that the journalists are not too greedy when the lads come across the line, because it's a very, very hard moment for them to do what they're doing now. So I just hope the journalists now have some kind of responsibility themselves, and they're going to take on themselves not to be diving with microphones in their mouths and taking every kind of photographs. I think they should leave them alone, I think.
1 kilometre to go for the Motorola team on the front. The riders coming in now to pay their respects to Fabio Casatelli, who died after that accident yesterday. Lance Armstrong, number 111, the captain, ex-world champion. 112, Frankie Andreu for the United States. 113, Steve Bauer from Canada. 115, Alvaro Mejia from Colombia. 117, Andreu Peran from Italy. 118 is Stephen Swart from New Zealand. They showed enormous courage to start today. They all decided last night that the best way they could pay their respects to their late teammate was to ride today. It was a difficult decision. Although the sun was shining this morning and the atmosphere was heavy though, the black ribbons fluttering on the aerials of the motor roller cars, these riders started out on the 237 kilometres to pole in memory of Fabio Casatelli, who passed away yesterday. Mass riders have now crossed the line. It's been a tough day for all of them, but not so tough as those motor roller riders, their team, and the family of Fabio Casatelli back at home, mourning the loss of their loved one. Motor roller take the stage from Tarbes to Po.